Go. Welcome, everybody, to Contemporary Issues Sunday School class here on May 29th, I think, today, last of May. It's flying along. We're getting into summer. Nice to see everybody here today. And we are going to talk about small groups today with Reverend Lauren Boyd of St. Andrew, our pastor of small groups, and give sermons and all kinds of other things. So it'd be a great opportunity to get to know Lauren a little better and ask her about small group dynamics and what we should be doing as a Sunday school class and that kind of thing. So before we get started, welcome, Lauren. And I just do a couple announcements here. Everybody, if you would mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen so we keep the background noise down, and then unmute when you want to talk. And we are recording today for future playback. And please be kind to our speaker and to each other. Usually, we occasionally have folks who want to disagree and challenge the speaker, and this is not really the forum to do that. So I ask that we hold those kind of things till afterwards. Okay, well, let me introduce Lauren. Well, before we do that, we always ask for announcements. Anybody have anything they'd like to share? Do you like the sermon today? How was the in-person service, growing with more people? I hear I wasn't there today, but I was last week, and we have no more reservation requirements. Is that right, Lauren?
That's right. And next week we go to 9 and 10:30. So
Ooh, all right.
with the mortgage burning in the middle, we're going to have a ceremony outside. Mortgage burning. It's a copy. It's not the
Oh,
real
it's
one.
not the
So
right
don't,
one.
don't
Okay,
be nervous.
that's okay.
Lauren, within the
Um,
sanctuary, are people still maintaining distance and wearing
In certain, it seems like where they need it, they are. And the whole section kind of near the organ is pretty open. At least it was last week and today. But there's some that are right on top of each other that seem happily smushed together again.
Are
great.
masks required still?
They are for now. And mostly, a big thing is that most of our children aren't vaccinated. And so, it's this, um, it's trying to keep them safe. And most of them aren't in the sanctuary, but a few are. And so it's just for now. I'm so ready to burn mine along with the mortgage, but
Yeah,
it did keep us healthy this winter, didn't it?
absolutely. But there is that feeling that we're on a faster roll now toward getting rid of the mask and more people, and
Yeah.
to see how fast that goes.
Yeah.
I have a joy I'd like to share.
Go ahead, Jim.
About 5 years ago, I lost my wedding ring, and I was greatly distressed when I couldn't find it. Uh, Wednesday, I was looking for something else under my sister-in-law's car, under the seats and everything. Jane was looking, and she's the one that actually found it. It
Oh
was
my
under
gosh.
the driver's seat in the car.
Oh,
I thought I'd never see it again, and now I have it back.
wow. Good story. That's terrific. That's
That's
really neat, Jim.
that's amazing. In your sister-in-law's car?
Yes. Well, she's an invalid, and my our daughter takes care of her full time.
Okay.
And so we frequently, exchange cars when one's getting serviced or something. Uh, yeah.
Good story.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me go ahead and introduce Lauren so we have plenty of time to talk with her and ask questions. Lauren's originally from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. She graduated from St. Edward's University with her bachelor's in religious studies, and then she went to Duke University for graduate school. Graduated, yay, Duke, that's right, in 2003. She's been in professional ministry for 17 years and has served in Texas, North Carolina, and Denver. She and her family have lived in the metro area for 12 years, and her partner and I believe wife, Candy Boyd, is a chaplain at Craig Hospital. Is that right, Lauren?
It is.
Great. And do you all have a son? Do I understand correctly?
We do.
Great.
We do. I will.
How old is he?
He is 13 and a half. He is 5'8", and his foot is a size 12.
Wow.
So that is Miller
Great.
Boyd. Yep. Friday was his last day of school, which I don't know if you guys have grandkids and do the
Oh, yeah.
whole like beginning of school, end of school photos, but this was his last day of school. So
Cute. Cute. I'm
yes,
so glad we can hold up pictures to the screen. That's a great idea, Lauren.
thanks.
Zoom is handy for some uses. Absolutely.
It is. It is.
Do you have any other kids besides Miller?
No, my spouse would say she has two, the two of us, because I am pretty rowdy, but no, just the two of us. And so this is the two of us. And
Oh, cute. Cute
yeah,
pic.
yeah.
Great. Great. And how long has it been now that you've been with St. Andrew, Lauren?
A year, almost.
Just a year.
July
Yep.
1st will be a year.
Last July. And
Hmm.
before that, you were with the B3 congregation in Stapleton area,
Hmm.
right? Okay. And just so we know a little bit about you. And were you doing small groups there? Were you the sole pastor there? What did you do?
I actually started the church 4 years ago, now 5 years ago. It is one of the new church starts at the conference, kind of fresh expressions, new ways of getting people who don't ordinarily go to church to go to church. So it met on Thursday nights for people who work weekends or, are at Bronco games or in the mountains year round, because in the South where I'm from, you go do your life, but you're in church on Sunday no matter what. And that's not really the case out here for a lot of people. So,
Mhm.
our mountains are always calling us to them year round. So we started a church called BE, like the verb to be, 3 for believe, belong, become. And we met on Thursday nights at a church in Montclair neighborhood, if you guys know where that is, just south of Stapleton.
Mhm.
And we would sing a few songs, and then we would eat dinner around dinner tables and talk about life, and then I would preach and do joys and concerns. And it was about an hour and a half each Thursday night, but it included so much that it was a really neat for that community. So I did that for 4 years and then was appointed here as one of your associates.
Great. Great. Well, we wanted you to start off today telling us about what small groups are going at St. Andrew. We know that we have our Sunday schools met for at least 10 years there in this Sunday school class that talks about current issues from a Christian perspective. And there's, of course, classes and UMW groups and support groups and men's covenant groups. And we know one of the new things, Lauren, is the Life Together groups, Better Together groups. Tell us a little about that and what you all are doing, please.
Sure. So my title is pastor of group life, and that includes the Sages Ministry. It includes, which is, if any of you know or attend or are part of Sages, it's a big group of people.
Mhm.
It includes UMW, which is a big group of ladies, MOPS, young families, young moms with preschoolers, and all sorts of groups, large and small, that didn't have a specific home, or maybe they were under pathways kind of by default, um, are now a part of my ministry. So I get to meet with them and support them as they need it. So that's and a lot of it is giving attention to some really valuable, amazing ministries that just haven't had a personal touch from a pastor in a long time, to really, say what you're doing is valuable and worthy, and how can we, get the word out about what you're doing, or how can we help you? So so that's been really fun. Apparently, there's a long history of small groups at this church. They've been called tons of different things, as you know. I had a list at some point on my bulletin board here in my office of all these different groups that are in the church. And in most churches, to have 40 small groups, not counting Sunday school classes or pathway stuff, 40 groups is a lot. And that's what we already have. So it's actually a lot. We're doing pretty well. Before you guys were doing well before I ever got here, and some were called Better Together, some were, so there was community life groups before that, and just all these different iterations. And a lot of them are still around, and you may be a part of some of those. And so again, it's, if they're going and they're going well, then they, just kind of fall under this heading of group life with me. And where if you are a part of a group and you have an opening or openings for new people, that's a good thing to let me know, so that we can advertise that these groups are there. Some groups, like there's a boomer group that has a few couples and they're from the choir and they're full. They have, it's the men of note and their wives, and they don't have space for new people, or they've connected so deeply that that having someone new come in, you're talking about prostate cancer, or you're talking about, the death of a loved one, and someone new comes, it's a disconnect. And so so some of those groups, and we have on the website under life groups, because that's the newest name for these same groups. So group life is my title, and then life groups are the specific small groups that we're starting. And we're kind of giving that the heading for new people coming in. So it's not confusing that we have men's covenant groups and we have this groups and this and that, but they're all life groups, but they've all got these different, they're they're all small groups, and we try to make it as difficult as possible, don't we, with all the different names. So a church this size really should have, a good 20-30% of the congregation in small groups. And even though non-denominational churches in the 90s made small groups a really big thing, really John Wesley started that. He said, we all go to our Anglican church each Sunday, and then we go back home to our houses and our communities. A lot of them were into small communities, and they certainly were connected. But they weren't furthering their faith. They were listening to a sermon and going to their service on Sunday, and then going home and living out their life and probably praying. But he said, it is really important that you get to know the Bible. And so I want you to have a big group on Sundays or time frame that's kind of what we call Sunday school class. And I want you to learn a lot about God and faith and the Bible and all of that. Then I want you to have a medium-sized group. Maybe you do dinner with, or you get together with, or you go do mission work with, and you're a little bit closer. Then I want you to have a group of, between 5 to 10, maybe 12 people that know your innermost thoughts and workings. And one part of the Bible says, don't judge, or you have the plank in your eye. But Paul talks about, when you see someone doing something wrong, correct them. And what's interesting about that is apparently he didn't mean, go up to a stranger and say, it looks like you're married, and clearly she's a lot younger than you, and that's not okay. or walking up to a young person and saying, all those tattoos, the Bible says not to have tattoos, and so you shouldn't have those. Or all these different things, again, not judging, but when you're in a small group and you get to know each other, you say, listen, I am struggling drinking I drink Diet Coke like it's water, like I could have it tapped into my veins, and it's not good for me, and it could cause cancer apparently, and it's keeping me from losing weight and all the things. And I could say to my Tuesday night life group, I really need you to hold me accountable and ask me. Maybe somebody send me an email or a text, or check on me and say, have you had that water first? You know,
Good
or
point.
have you checked on, or saying, I've got quite a temper and I really need help with this or this. Can you hold me accountable? Um,
That
or
was a
you
John
say,
Wesley thing too, wasn't it, Lauren? He really held people accountable for reading and service and behavior, all those things in the small groups.
he really
Well,
did. And he said that is what is so, so important. And you could even say lovingly to somebody, listen, I've noticed such and such going on in your life. And I love you so much. And I think that's damaging. How can I help you with that? But you don't say that to somebody you don't know or don't know well, and so these groups are set in these different levels to help you walk through this faith and to do this journey of Christian life together. And so we're doing that here, adding new groups.
great. Well, I want to open this up. We're informal every week here, and Lauren, we range from 20 people to 70 or 100 sometimes in the church. So I want to just open up to anybody that wants to ask Lauren a question, and I could talk to Lauren for an hour just about small groups by myself, but I don't want to dominate as I often do. So, well, Lauren, let me go ahead and start and do dominate. You mentioned size of small groups from 5 to even the big group, considering our in-person worship to be our large group. Yeah.
Right.
Is there an ideal size, especially for a Sunday school like this? Is 12 good? Is 50 okay? What do you think?
It really depends upon what your purpose is.
Mhm.
And so, I just go back to to Jesus and the disciples, and I think 12 is a magic number. It's within a group where everyone can be heard and everyone can be seen and everyone can have their needs addressed and be connected. But it's not so small that if you didn't, if it's really small, then there's such a weight on you sometimes to interact, to talk, to
Yes.
share what you want to share. And different people are different. They work differently. And so it's nice to have a group like a 12 is really kind of the magic number for a small group. But for Sunday school, it depends. I mean, if it's more educational and you're receiving more than you're interacting, um, something I've learned from our bishop is that when she does lectures, she always has us stop and talk to the person next to us or get in a group of 4 for like 3 minutes and answer a question. And she may do that to us a few times. And I've found that really does, again, make people feel seen and heard. And you get your questions asked. And you have to think about things when they ask questions. She'll ask a question and someone will pull something amazing out and you're like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Well, let me tell you, that makes me think of this time. And so I think if
So
it
it's
really does,
not just a lecture.
yeah, unless it is,
Hmm.
you know but being able to break into small groups to be able to talk and be heard. And if you're in something like that and you need a smaller group to connect with, then also do that, like John Wesley had them.
Very good. Okay. Anybody else jump in or I'll keep asking questions. Um, What about disagreements in small groups, Lauren? To be honest, in our group here, since we talk about politics and social issues, we have people sometimes who want to share their expertise or disagree so much they can be disruptive. And we've had a few people leave over the years because they just couldn't contain themselves and tried to really be aggressive. How do you
Mm.
deal with people like that and just trying to get along with everybody in a small group?
I think when starting a group, having a covenant that everyone agrees to is really important. Like what you spoke about at the beginning, be kind to one another, be kind to your speaker, be kind, be kind to one another. I had a professor that used to talk about word care,
Hmm.
and he said just because um, someone's dress is ugly, and that's the truth, you don't have to tell them that it's ugly. If their dress is tucked into their pants because they went to the bathroom, that would be helpful to tell them. I mean, there's truth, and then there's just saying things that are harmful. you know and so speak word care, speaking in love, and that some things just don't need to be said, and that in a forum like this, um, keeping it above board is helpful and kind. But then in smaller groups where you have safety, where you know that someone is going to love you at the end of the day, even if you completely disagree with them, or you can apologize because you know each other well and can sincerely apologize because you've hurt them. And we do it. We today in the sermon, it was so good about the divine self that walks into the playground, and then the human self that steals its lunch money. I mean, we I loved that so much.
Good.
So I think a covenant is really helpful, and then sticking to that and saying, you know I'll pick on Jane since she knows I'm okay. She's okay with it. To say, um, Jane, can we talk about that afterwards? Or, thank you for that statement, but that may have not been helpful this time. And pulling that aside. And I'm sure that you handle that well in this class. And truly, some people are just combative, and they are not lifelong learners.
Hmm. Well,
My
Uh,
emotional intelligence is hard too. Not everybody can sense what's too aggressive and what's not.
Yeah. Yeah,
Steve,
go ahead.
you touched on something that I've thought a lot about recently. People are losing friendships because of politics. And I think that's a terrible tragedy to lose a friend over politics. Friendships are something precious in your life. It's a great blessing to have friends, and you should think that a friend is a lot more than their political beliefs.
Right.
And if you have trouble thinking about that, start with your parents. Your parents are a lot more than political beliefs. You know that. You know that. You've had their love for all kinds of reasons. So don't lose a friend because of politics. That's a great tragedy in your life, really. And I'm sure you know if you've lost a friend through that reason, I'm sure you have many thoughts, many reflections of regret for that.
It is particularly true in families
Mhm.
where you have both parties represented and you will never agree, but you love them, they love you, and you have so many things in common that it is possible, because that's the way I live, to get along if you remember God loves you as much as he loves me, even though I'd like to wring your neck sometimes. Um, those kinds of things are really good to think about What's more important?
Thank you, Jan. Those are good thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you made me think of, Jim, is that, you know, years ago, before I went to seminary, I was a conservative Republican, and I left a bleeding heart liberal like tree hugger. And I then it's been 17 years I've been out of seminary, so I found my footing and grounding somewhere in the middle. But it used to be an argument about small government or taxes, or, you know, they're not innocuous. I mean, it's certainly, if someone's going to take your money and use it for something else, that is your money, and that's, you know, that's important. But as of late, what's come out is some of it's life or death. You know, it's me saying to one of my really good friends who's African American, you know, that whether your life matters more or less, or your, you know, it, or a young girl who has been molested by a family member and now is pregnant, and, you know, what do we do with that? How do we work that? You know, that those are political issues that become very personal when it has to do with people. And that is difficult. But I have two friends that are cops that were neighbors of ours, and we moved, and we are very much on the opposite sides of the political realm. And it is hard, but I appreciate both of your words today. It makes me want to give them a call, because I've just shied away, because I'm like, they're not going to change their minds, and we're not going to, you know, change ours. But they're still loving and kind, and we love their little girl. So
That's
I
great.
think that's one of the keys, that you can always, no matter how different someone thinks from you, there is some place where there's common ground. We had a family situation where we had a family member who went through a very fundamentalist stage. We could not talk about a whole lot of things. But if you look for some of those things, even in those hard things, there's common ground. You may be pro-choice or pro-life, but you're still pro. I mean, you know, you're still in favor of life. It's just how you define it. I think that if you start talking, oftentimes you find you're not as far apart as you thought.
Exactly. Thank you.
And we've tried to do that in this class here too, and welcome people from both sides and tell the feelings of both sides, and hope everybody has felt heard for that. Well, it's 11 o'clock, and I want to ask Aaron or Lauren a few more small group questions, and hope you will. And I also want to, toward the end, ask Lauren about some theological questions, if she doesn't mind.
I'd love
Just
it.
some of the big things. Where are you at with theology, with even the virgin birth and Jesus' divinity? Some of those little questions, you know? So, yeah. So, but let me ask first, Lauren. Obviously, our class here is 40 or 50 and up. We occasionally have had younger people, but how do we mix and get younger people into small groups in our church and others? What's a good way to try to do that, or is it not realistic to mix age groups so much?
I think when they're starting, it's a lot easier to say this is a group of people that are coming together, you know, and it works because it's a Tuesday night, or it works because it's a Friday morning, and whoever comes, and it is so rich when it mixes generations and mixes sexes, you know, when there's that dynamic like this group here. That's wonderful. But it is hard when there's an established group to bring new people in. You know, it just is. And I've talked some with Rev Jerry about the men's covenant groups, because I'm like, well, that's technically under group life, you know, even though you're a man and you know, it's under your kind of purview. But I think maybe just starting new men's groups that fit with times, that working working young dads, can do. And it may be that it's forever Zoom for them, or it may be that it's happy hour before they go home on a Thursday night. It's finding what really does. There's a great story about, do y'all remember years ago, it was like a rethinking faith, it was a Methodist like evangelism tool that came out, and all the churches had to take classes about it. And in that class, they talked about a church that the neighborhood had really changed where the church was. It had become this Hispanic neighborhood all around the church, and the people who attended the church no longer lived in the neighborhood. And they wanted to reach out to the neighborhood, and they thought, ooh, if we offer babysitting for all of these moms, then they'll come to things. And it was a really great thought because there were a lot of young people and no one came. And they ended up going around the neighborhood and talking to people and saying, what do you need? What would be helpful in your life? And they found out that there was a rat infestation in this neighborhood, and that people's homes had these rats, and that they wanted to protect their children. They wanted to protect, themselves and their food and all the things. And so the church ended up paying for all of this, like these rats to be missing. And so suddenly when they did that, like that was a huge issue. And they started coming to the church because they felt comfortable leaving their home and their animals at home, and they could come with their kids, or they could, do these different things. It was just totally not what they thought the answer was going to be. And it's probably been 15 years since I heard that, but it has stuck with me, because sometimes we think we know what people need, and it's something very different. So it could be that, these kind of younger folks want it. Like right now we have a life group that meets on Sundays and they go hiking. And Jason Snow, one of Jason Snow's sons, leads that. And it's young 20 somethings that are doing that. And they don't want to meet on a night, and they don't want to meet in a bar. They want to be outside. And, so that's what they chose. I'm not, go ahead.
Have to do what they're interested in.
Yeah.
What gets them.
Yeah.
Lauren, how about singles groups? I don't know that we've had a singles group at St. Andrew for a long time, and we occasionally hear that. Should we have dedicated singles small groups?
I personally think it's creepy.
Okay.
It's usually a lot of ladies and one gentleman that, is what I've found in all the churches where I've served.
Sounds good for him, though.
Yeah, I'm going to look at you all and see before I say this, so it's the one dude like this, and and I know I'm recorded.
Lauren.
Shoot, I forgot I'm recorded.
It's okay.
Gnarly.
The comb over.
Yes, and
Yeah.
and a bad one, at that.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of ladies, and it seems better. I found that when they're integrated into the life of the church, and then they're in a group with women that are single, and women that are married, and folks that are, and then you organically meet somebody's friend who's a newly a widow, or are going to the Boulder Dinner Theater or different places with a group of people, and you meet someone new if you're into the meeting stage. But it I have found, back when I was single, and then now been married for a long time, but that seems to be a more holistic way to do it. But if
Well, it
someone
does
wanted to start a group, they could.
Yeah, nobody has at St. Andrew, probably for that very reason. The focus is so much on, we're all single. Are we going to connect in this group? Yeah. So good question. Thank you, Lauren.
You're welcome.
Okay. Lauren, what makes a successful small group, and what makes them fail? Any particular behavior or facets that determine if one is successful?
What do you guys think makes a successful group? I mean, have you been a
Good
part of
question.
this group itself, this Sunday school class or another small group, or Norley, you could even speak to our Tuesday night group.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about the small group that I've been going to that Lauren formed for, basically it's reading books that are of interest to everybody. And also we're doing the stamped from the beginning, like the church is going to be doing. But for me, it's really that feeling of safety. And also I think the size of the group is extremely helpful as well. Getting to know people on a deeper level, I think is easier when there's a smaller group. So that's what I found works for me.
I think it's best when everybody gets to talk. And sometimes if you get a moderator, it's too, as you said, Steve, it's too directed from one person, or there's usually several people. I talk a lot of people don't. And I know whenever I have been in charge of a group, I really try to get everybody to talk. And many times a person that doesn't talk a lot is right on when they open up.
Yep.
And it's important to get everybody in a group heard.
You know, I think that it needs somebody or a couple of people that are willing to take responsibility for lessons and whatnot. I know Steve and Ron do a lot of back and forth as to what the next lesson's going to be. And you know, it can be a burden too. If they are always in charge and always trying to come up with subjects. I see this going on. And it's like, you know, maybe we ought to get a few more people involved in this. And while I'm speaking, I'm part of the sisters group as well as Joy. And we usually have a book that we're reading, but quite often we'll go off on tangents. We had a group on Wednesday that I think there were 12 people there. And that was just kind of extra people that were able to meet there, but we have had as many as 35, I guess. So, and we're always willing to have new people. There's no cap.
Thank you, Alice.
Lauren, when new people are coming into the church, how do you help them find an appropriate group?
Good question.
That they would fit?
Good question. So we're part of my
Lauren, you just froze.
kind of takes them deeper into pathways and discipleship. So for me, meeting with people and having lunch or coffee with them and getting to know them is really helpful to then know where, to suggest for them to go. But that is if groups are open. But I've spent the last year working and crafting this ministry and concept, and have people on a lay board with me talking about these life groups. And it's an experiment. Something I've learned in ministry is that nothing is set in stone, and that you get to experiment. And if things are set in stone, then you can't move them, and then they get stagnant and they can die. So you have to, to be flexible and be able to be agile. And so the experiment right now is starting groups at Lent that we're reading the Lenten books along with our Pathways groups, with the option to stay in the group, because now they've had a short amount of time, but they've been together. They've had a leader for the group. And then they can say, yeah, I'd really like to be a part of this, or actually this time frame doesn't really work, or man, Jane talks way too much. I'm going to pick on you again, Jane, because I know you. Or something like that, you know? And then I can say, well, actually let me see if we can get you into another group if that's interested in that. Or if you'd rather just do pathways classes, we have those too, you know, and being able to do that. So we did that at Lent, and we'll do it again in the fall. And, but the thing that I'm learning from some other churches is that when you have a membership class, and ours is, you know, an hour and a half class, then having that group go and become a small group for just like 6 weeks. And that's not part of the membership class. It's a life group, but it's the possibility of them then journeying together. You know, they all, like Jerry and I came in together at the same time as pastors, and we've really connected. And it's not that I don't love Kendall. It's not that I don't love Rev Mark. But there's this camaraderie of coming in together. It's like initiation or being pledges in a sorority or fraternity. You know, you have this connection of coming in at the same time. And so, and then, like you mentioned, Steve, then they are new retirees that move, you know, or they've moved here because they now have grandkids here, or they're young and they have kids, and then they become a family. You know, they can become a family for each other when our families are spread across the country. So I do think it's really good what Alice said about leaders and getting tired, you know, or always doing something the same way, or really if there is somebody toxic in a group, not being able to address it and move on. And sometimes things are really good for the time being, that they're a thing, and they're not meant to be forever. Somebody mentioned to me recently about how none of the churches, and I don't know if this is true, so I shouldn't say this, but none of the churches that were started in the first century are still churches. You know, those people died off, or there was a war, there was a whatever, and they started new churches. You know, that we think that we've got to hold on white knuckled to our churches or to our groups or to whatever we start. And it may be that, you know, the sewing circle or a certain men's group or something was really good and really amazing at some point, and maybe it's not anymore. And you go, that was really good and that was really amazing. And we've had to do that a lot with churches and in our conference. Man, it did some great work for 50 years, but the time has come for that to close and birth something new, you know? And so I think recognizing that and celebrating, man, our group was wonderful for a long time. Now let's spread apart and let's start new groups, or let's take a break, or whatever it is.
Sometimes it's really hard for people to walk into a group when they don't know other people. And somebody says, well, stand up and tell us a few things about yourself. Oh, you want to crawl under the table.
Yeah.
So what I found has really, really worked is when you have people coming into the group, you have, and the group may or may not know each other real well, but everybody who's new, pick somebody who they don't know or somebody who they don't know well, and have that person interview you. Then the person who's comfortable in the group is the person who stands up and tells about you. You're off the hook completely.
Good idea.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It also, you know, something like, you know, I know that Helen Burnside's been so great about meeting people at Cafe Connect, and then she'll take them to somebody else and introduce them and say, Steve, this is so-and-so, and I'd love for them to come to your class. And then you end up talking with them, and, you know, then you can introduce them, or that sort of thing. You know, but people walking cold into things, people like to do.
It's really hard.
Now you feel exposed. Yeah.
Okay, Lauren, we've got about 13 minutes left. Let's talk theology.
Okay.
I know it's hard to make this brief, but how about those little questions like, do you think if heaven and hell are real places, or were they symbols in the Bible? And was Jesus God come to earth, or was he more of a fully human person that was just connected to God in a special way?
All right. So my Duke seminary background is pretty orthodox. And when I moved here, we actually moved here 17 years ago to Denver. And I was teaching a class at Park Hill, and somebody said, I said, Jesus is the only way. And it was just in conversation about something else in a class. And he said, I don't buy that. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? He was like, I don't buy that. I said, you know, you're in a Christian church, in a Methodist Christian church. It's kind of like the linchpin. And but being here 17 years in the West has really broadened my view on a lot of things. So here's my take on most of it,
Okay.
is that God is so big, and being a parent helps. God is so big, and scripture tells us God is good and God loves us. And we get to see about this much of what God is, who God is. Kind of like this, our kids know this much about who we really are as people. There's more to us, but this is what's written in the book. And so what I know of God is that God is huge and big and loving and amazing. And so people all around the world know God in some way, because God is loving and big and amazing, and is interacting with them, even if it isn't through a Christian evangelist. I know that there are other expressions of faith, and that it looks like there are other expressions that I will acknowledge as roots to God. And I was talking in with my small group about being grafted into the tree. You know, in scripture, it talks about Judaism is the tree. They're God's people. And we are grafted as Gentiles into that tree. So they're really good to go. Like, God's got them. And we're grafted into this tree. And then all of us that have different beliefs, as long as it's that connection to God in scripture, through Jesus, good to go, you know? And yes, to me, I choose to believe in the Trinity, and in Jesus fully human and fully divine, and in the virgin birth, because the biggest thing is that a man was on a cross and he died and he was resurrected and then he ascended. And I kind of feel like if you believe that part, the other stuff's cake. The other stuff's details. You know, did he walk on water? Did he turn water into wine? Doesn't really matter if he died and was resurrected and rose and he's our God, then I pretty much believe the other stuff, you know? And for people who don't, okay, God's got you, you know? I'm not saving anybody. Jesus already did that, you know? But I can talk to people about relationship with Jesus and how much he loves us. And in a year like we've just had, how hard it must be for people who don't believe in Jesus, who have no hope of the now, and no hope of the afterlife, and no relationship with an invisible God that's sitting with you in the midst of this sadness and grief of the last year. How sad. And so I want to be able to share that and say, he's not going to fix your life, but he's with you in the midst of it. And that's a really big deal. So I think God is so big that there've got to be other paths, but this is the one I choose, and this is the one I preach, and this is the one that, you know, that I'll talk about.
Thank you, Lauren. I think a lot of us are there with you in this class and in St. Andrew. And God is big enough that he could be all those things that the traditional beliefs entail. Absolutely. We question them, which is good, but he's big enough that he could be all those things too. Any questions for Lauren on these topics?
Can I tell you something funny?
Sure.
So a few weeks ago, Rev Jerry and I were on a Zoom call with the other pastors, and we had communion over online. And he just said, I don't like communion, doing communion online. And a professor of mine said this about, this and that. And instead of saying, well, I think it's just fine, instead I wrote, would you ever baptize without water? And if you know Rev Jerry, exactly, Jane. I'm like, a good mom, you just, but he just said, no, how could you do that? And I said, I just think that the Jesus that I know from scripture would have shared communion elements by getting a nut off the ground in the forest and saying, here, okay, like this is my body, and I'm going to say a prayer and it's going to be it for you. And I want you to know that I'm sharing, or I'm sharing my bread, I'm sharing my PBJ with you. And I'm going to say, like, every time you eat, every time you drink, every time you breathe, I'm with you. And when you're with other people, it's church, And if you're in the middle of nowhere, you're in a desert or you're on a mountain and there's no water around, and someone says, I get it, and I want to be baptized, I think that Jesus would say, right there, it's a symbol of the water is a symbol of the inward grace. And you put your hands on that person and you pray that prayer and you say, you are baptized. But I graduated in 2003. So what is that, 18 years ago? And have been in ministry even longer. And even though Jerry's 5 years older than I am, he's newer to Christianity. He's newer to seminary, and seminary completely takes your brain apart and smushes it up, and then you put it back together with what the tools they give you. And so he is he's really orthodox in those things. And so that 17 more years of it of being in ministry and of doing this and of being in the West has really formed those beliefs for me.
Yeah. Jerry's had quite a journey too, from orthodoxy to progressive thought. He's shared that with us here.
Oh, it's so
Very,
good. Yeah.
he is wonderful. We're so glad to have both of you here.
Thank you.
And Lauren, how soon do you think we'll be able to get back into the building? Now, we know it's changing every day, but our class is anxious to get back in our room in the building. Any thoughts that you've heard lately?
Our grand reopening as of now is September 12th, I think. Let me grab my calendar.
Yeah, I think that's what I heard too.
So actually my calendar is at home.
Okay.
So by then you can be back in your classroom and, I imagine masks off and hugging and sitting next to each other and all that good stuff. So that would be the latest date. But, we opened for smaller groups with masks a few weeks ago. And then we were like, numbers are on the rise and we've kept everybody so healthy. We don't want to blow it now. Now all the staff and pastors are vaccinated. So I think for a special thing, we're having a funeral in the fellowship hall on Friday for J.P. Allen, Daphne Allen's husband, which you're welcome to come to. And that, that could be several people, and we're now having a bunch in the sanctuary. And June 19th, we'll have Evensong will be back in person. And if you read the vlog or actually the e-news, Jen is moving on and is going to be doing more showers for all and other things. So she will no longer be at our church. So I'm going to work with Justin on crafting the worship for Evensong, and which I've been doing contemporary worship service for about 25 years. So I'm really excited to jump in and be a part of that. And
Will that be live in person?
It will,
It's
June
Saturday night?
19th.
Good.
And then June 20th, our 8 a.m. service, which Jerry is now in his in his Orthodox way. He's gonna just infuse life and orthodoxy into 8 a.m. service. So we're excited about that. So yeah, we're really, each step of the way. Next week we add 10:30, and then the June 19th and 20th we'll add services. So I would say sooner rather than later, Steve, but I would think the latest would be September 12th. Because we
Great.
want you back. It's pretty amazing to see people in the building.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. We just got a
And
couple minutes left. Go ahead, Lauren.
a big focus is in starting the small groups is that they don't happen here. So we do have other groups that meet here. I mean, that's certainly, and that's fine. If you are in a small group and it meets at the church, it doesn't have to change. But these new groups going forward really is to, the focus is to be in the world, to meet in people's homes or meet in restaurants and get out of, and it is more intimate if you're sitting in someone's living room and can really connect with one another than around a table with fluorescent lights.
We're about out of time. Anybody else? Question? Anybody that hasn't asked anything? Go right ahead. Okay. One more question, Lauren, that I was thinking of. What role is Zoom going to play going forward with our small groups? We've, for this class, had a lot of requests, like Susan Sutton, who's in Canada. We want to Zoom so she can continue to be with us. And where do you see this going, and how can the church help us do that?
Yeah, we have these Zoom accounts and we'll continue them. So whenever you want to, meet on Zoom, you certainly can do it. Some of our small groups will continue to be virtual because we have people around the country that are joining them. We are working on having some really high-tech carts that can go into classrooms that you can do a hybrid. So we'll have a few classrooms that will be set up for that, so that Susan could be on the screen, and there's a camera that can pick up the rest of you, and really good sound. We have one right now that works well, that we still use for our staff meetings, because we have a few people that are still staying home because of COVID, and it works great. Works really well. It's something else to get used to, but
and it's more high tech than just a laptop sitting in front of the speaker.
It is.
Good.
It is, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, we'll continue to do that as people want to, and giving those options.
Good.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Lauren, for taking an hour with us. We learned a lot.
Hi, my pleasure.
So glad to have you. Okay, we will see you next Sunday at the mortgage burning too. That's exciting.
It is exciting. I'll see you at 9 or 10:30.
Okay.
Blessings. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks,
you, Lauren.
everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.